Folks, welcome back to another episode of Mayhem in the Midsouth. Today, never-ending nightmare. Folks, today we're going to be in Austin, Texas. It's going to be a case of a robbery and the execution murder of 4 little girls that sure didn't deserve to die. In fact, these murders are so horrible, I wonder if the robbery was just an excuse to take the life of human beings. It was so violent and so outrageous. Now, the primary resource material I'm using for this is the Court of Appeals, great state of Texas. So this story here should be very accurate. It's December 6, 1991. Now, owner of a party supply store, which is located in a little strip mall there, he heard some sounds coming from the roof. And then he heard popping noises. He looked outside and he saw smoke coming from the front of the frozen yogurt shop next door. And that smoke was also coming into his store. So he opened up his back door for ventilation. Now when he looked outside, he noticed that the back door at the yogurt shop was partially open and he could see flames inside. Now at that same moment, he saw a police officer driving through the alley behind the stores. The officer, he saw the fire and he called it in. Time was 11:47 p.m. Now, the first firefighters to arrive at the yogurt shop, they found the front door locked, so they had to force it open. Now, the shop was dark, full of smoke, so firefighters do what they do at a fire scene. They start knocking the fire down. Now, the fire was worse at the rear of the shop, so now they're working their way back towards the rear of the building, and that's when they discovered the 4 bodies. 17-year-old Eliza Thomas. She was an employee there at the shop. Thomas's co-worker, Jennifer Harbison, who was also 17. Then Jennifer's 15-year-old sister, Sarah Harbison. And then Sarah's friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers. Now, Amy was planning on spending the night with Sarah, and these 2 younger girls had walked to the yogurt shop from the North Cross Mall. Well, that mall was just a couple minutes away, and they were going to get a ride home with Jennifer. Now, the layout of the yogurt shop, the courts described it as deep and narrow. The front 2/3 of the space is for public use, tables and a counter, cash register. Now, the chairs had been stacked on the tables, which was part of the closing routine. Now, behind the counter was a wall with a door on the right-hand side that opened up into the rear third of the shop. Now, a person walking through this door entered a preparation area with a sink and a table. The cash register drawer was found on this table. On the right wall of this area, where the bathrooms are, and then on the opposite wall is a walk-in cooler. Now, behind the cooler in the left rear corner of the shop is a storage area with shelves full of paper goods, cleaning materials. Right rear corner was the shop's office, and this door was closed. Now, little Amy Ayers, her body was found on the floor in the preparation area. She had a ligature around her neck, and it was determined at the autopsy that she had been manually strangled, but not fatally. She also had a bruise on her lower lip. She was naked, and a blouse tied into a knot was found beneath her body. Ayers had 2 contact gunshot wounds, one on the top left side of her head and the other behind her left ear. The first of these was caused by a .22 caliber bullet, which did not penetrate the skull. The medical examiner testified that this shot was not fatal. The second fatal gunshot wound was caused by a .380 caliber bullet that passed through the brain and exited through Ayers' right cheek, which of course was 2 different guns used that would initially tell the police that there was at least 2 bad guys. The other 3 bodies were found on the floor of the storage area, covered with rubble from the fire. Eliza Thomas's body was lying on top of Sarah Harbison's body, and Jennifer Harbison's body was lying beside them. They too were all naked. The evidence suggests that the 3 bodies had been stacked and that Jennifer's body had rolled off the pile during the fire. All 3 bodies were badly burned and charred, with Jennifer's having been most severely damaged. Thomas's hands were tied behind her with a brassiere, and she had a gag in her mouth. Sarah Harbison's hands were tied behind her with panties, and she'd also been gagged. There was physical evidence that she had been vaginally assaulted, theorizing that the object used was an ice cream scoop found on the floor between her legs. Jennifer Harbison's hands were behind her back, as if they had been tied, but no binding was recovered. She had a ligature around her neck. Each of these girls had been killed by a single .22 caliber contact gunshot wound to the back of the head. Now, 4 .22 caliber bullets were recovered from the bodies during the autopsy. Due to the condition of the bullets, it was not possible to determine if all 4 had been fired from the same weapon. A .380 caliber bullet and a .380 caliber shell casing were recovered at the scene of the murders. Now, the unusual rifle pattern on the .380 bullet led a firearms expert to conclude that it was fired from an AMT backup, a small silver gray semi-automatic pistol. The murder weapons were never found. Now, originally, an arson investigator of the Austin Fire Department, he had concluded that the fire at the yogurt shop had been started on the shelves in the storage area and then had spread up the wall across the ceiling and down the opposite wall. Under this theory, the bodies had been burned primarily by radiant heat. Now, a special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, he reviewed the photographs several years later, in 1999. Now, according to him, he said analysis of the burn patterns, the damage to the bodies, and the relative amount of damage to other items in the area, Agent Littleton, he said that the fire had begun on the bodies in the center of the storage area. Now, later on in court, when the arson investigator said that he had reviewed the findings of the ATF agent, and he agreed with that conclusion, that the fire had begun on the body. Now, the manager of the yogurt shop, he described the store's closing routine. Said that one of the girls would first lock the front door, leaving the key in the double-cylinder deadbolt lock so that it would not be misplaced. Then you stack the chairs and sweep and mop the front service area. Now, while that's going on, the other employee will take care of the cash register drawer, take it to the back in the preparation area, count the money, and prepare a printed report. Then you drop the money into a combination safe in the floor. After that, the various food products would be placed in a cooler, and the yogurt machines, serving implements, and storage vessels would be washed. The girls would leave through the front door, relock it, and slide the key under the door in an envelope. After the fire, the key was found still in the front door lock. Manager testified that the back door of the shop had a deadbolt lock with a thumb latch on the inside. Manager had the only key to the back door, which ordinarily remained closed and locked. And the justices emphasized the fact, as previously noted, the back door was open on the night of the offenses. Now, there's several things. One, I don't see anything about taking the trash out. You know, it seems to be almost a ritual with businesses. When they close at night, some employee has to walk out to the dumpster and take the trash, which of course is how most of these robberies go down. You case the joint, you wait for the employee to take the trash out, and that's when you put a gun on them, walk back in to the business. But there's no mention of that. Now, the other theory is that somebody came in, they went to the bathroom. The bathroom is just a few steps away from that back door, so it would not be hard to head to the bathroom when nobody's looking, walk over there and unlock the deadbolt. Now, this case is frustrating not just because it's unsolved, but because it just seems like every time there's something good that happens, then that good disappears. Now, around 1999, they had 4 suspects. 2 of those 4 suspects actually confessed to the crime. Now, I read parts of their statement from this court decision, and I'm going to tell you something, it sure sounds like they did it. So now, 2 of them, they had to drop charges on them because they didn't have anything but these 2 confessions, which really makes it tough, because usually if you're going to charge a defendant based on the statement of a co-defendant, you've got to corroborate what they're saying. Now, the problem they had, at first it wasn't a problem. Those 2 suspects that confessed, they were found guilty by juries. One was sentenced to death and the other was sentenced to life in prison. Well, then they recovered some DNA. Now, you would think that's good. Well, it was good right up until they tested it, and that DNA exonerated all 4 of those suspects. Now, the 2 that were in prison, they'd already been fighting their convictions. And the Court of Appeals there in Texas, they actually sent both cases back down. And what the justices said is that you used a statement against the defendant showing his guilt. However, you didn't make that co-defendant available to be questioned and cross-examined by the defendant. So now the state's going to have to make a decision. Okay, are we going to retry them? Well, they had the DNA evidence that came back. It said that it didn't match any of them. So the prosecutor there elected not to retry, which I don't blame her, because if you got DNA and it don't match them, then you got a problem. Unless you had some other explanation for how that DNA got on those bodies, or the one body. So they were never retried. Now, they tried another method for DNA that had come out. Now, that DNA, supposedly there was a match for it. This particular DNA only deals with males, and it basically runs a family tree of all the males within that grouping. However, they had a problem because the federal government would not allow the state of Texas to have the information on who that match was. I don't know where that case is now, how it stands, but Texas is trying to figure out a way to get the feds to cough up that name. Now there is a theory, several police officers believe that the 4 that they had tried that got exonerated, that this crime was not committed by them, that this was done by some older, more sick individuals. Now they do know there were 2 males inside the shop just prior to it closing, but nobody's been able to come up with any identification on either one of the 2. But I would just think, as brutal and as horrible as this crime was, this wasn't their first rodeo right here. They seemed to enjoy this too much.